All right, welcome back. It is truly an honor to be able to grab a little bit of time inside of your head and heart and share things that I think so many people are navigating in service of helping you navigate them potentially a little bit better. So I want to dig right in. Let me ask you a question, something to just quick think about. Do you have to deal with difficult people ever? Right? Like, are there people in your life who kind of just really make you sort of miserable? Like people in your life who you see their name on your phone and you look down at your phone and it's like the blood rushes out of your body, right? Like you see their name and you just thank the Lord for decline, end, gone, boom. Or people, physically right in your life, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's a colleague that's just difficult, right? They're really difficult to deal with, to connect with, to maybe to trust, and maybe even fundamentally to get to know. Maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's a customer that has shown up or dropped into your world at some point. Maybe it's somebody who teaches your children, right? Or maybe it's a friend that's sort of a high maintenance sort of friend. I mean, is there anybody in your life that you can kind of think of, right? So I just want you to kind of consider that for a minute. And here's what I would sort of suggest. I would imagine either now or at some point in your life, you've probably had to navigate some people that at some level just fundamentally are sort of exhausting you. And what I really want to try to do is, look, I can't make them disappear, right? But what I really want to try to do is help you manage your energy around that relationship or those relationships better, and maybe, just maybe even connect with them. And here's what I would challenge you to consider. Are they just different? Right? Are they just different? So I'll tell you something cool. I was at my brother's house last weekend, and my sister-in-law had just gotten a new pair of glasses, and they were really cute, and I said, oh my gosh, those are great. I love them. And she said, oh yeah, they're great. Do you want to check them out, try them on? And so I put her glasses on, and she needs them for up close, far, and I put them on, and I mean, it was like my head started to spin, right? Like I couldn't see anything. It was really blurry. And I share that because those glasses and that prescription and those lenses, they work great for her, right? That is her ability to see things clearly through the lens of those glasses. And for me, no chance. I couldn't drive a car in them. I couldn't play tennis or golf in them. I couldn't do much in them at all. And I share that only because sometimes I would argue that people who are really difficult, maybe they're just looking through a different lens. And so potentially one way to think about it is maybe they're a different sort of, there's so many different personality types right in the world. Maybe they're sort of different from you in service of it causing, kind of a conflict, right? Maybe super different backgrounds or experiences in our lives. I mean, all of these things sort of show up in a way that can cause us to feel like somebody's just a total pain, but maybe they're just different, right? Maybe like the lenses were for me, I couldn't see clearly out of them, but they were perfect for her. And she sees great out of them. So our world is full of people who look through their own lenses at some level. And sometimes when we try to connect with people that are looking through a different lens, it can be really, really hard. And so I share that just as a backdrop for consideration. And you might be like, look, Molly, nice try. Like, look, the person that you're thinking of, you might say, look, they're not only difficult and different, they are a total and complete nightmare for me. So, Molly, here's the deal. Appreciate the little soft round edge you tried to throw on that with the lens analogy and the maybe they're just different. But look, this one that I'm dealing with, maybe you're thinking, they are totally difficult. And there is no other way to sort of look at it. And so I hear you, right? So let's sort of dig into that a little bit. And as many of you know, I love stories. I feel like they're just a fun way to share thoughts and ideas. And so I want to share a story. So check this out. My first job when I moved to Atlanta was, after navigating lots of different sort of odds and ends things and networking and various things, after a few months, I was able to land an opportunity really through just consistent networking with the Super Bowl host committee. So Super Bowl 28 was coming to Atlanta. I was at a sports sort of networking event and found my way and had an opportunity to meet a man by the name of Lehman Bennett. And Lehman was, at one point, the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he was going to be the executive director of the Super Bowl and host committee in Atlanta, and he was going to put a small team together. Long story short, I meet him. I get an opportunity to interview with he and another woman, and they hire me. And this was a 6-month gig in an office in downtown Atlanta. Now, I just have to lay this foundation. So the office was in downtown Atlanta in a building with no windows, and it was in the winter, right? So I would go in and it would be dark, and then I'd get in my car and I'd drive home and it would be dark. And I worked directly for this woman. And here's the deal. Now, I said on my resume, by the way, that I was the liaison for Super Bowl 28. Let me start that over, Chad. I said on my resume that I was the liaison for Super Bowl 28 with the commissioner of the NFL, the volunteers, the executive director of the host committee, transportation, sponsors, right? Sponsors and corporate sponsors that were a part of Super Bowl 28 in Atlanta. I was the liaison. Here's the truth. I answered the phone. Now, here's the deal. I was the liaison, right? I connected Paul Tagliabue, the commissioner of the NFL at the time, to Lehman Bennett. I connected the CMO of Coke to Lehman Bennett and the other people that I worked with. And so that was my role. I was the receptionist for Super Bowl 28. And Super Bowl 28, this is Molly, all day long, every day, literally for 6 straight months. And let me tell you, I was like playing, whack-a-mole with the phone. And for those of you that are under, 25, 30, this, by the way, is before computers, if you believe that there was a world before computers, and cell phones. So this was when, for the record, people would call an office and say, "Hi, this is so-and-so from Coke." Is the woman that I work for. I can't say her name because that's where I'm going with this story. She was the devil. Truly, I think she might have been. So here's the deal. She wasn't just different. She was so difficult, right? Like, I tried to look through the different lens, but the truth is, she was so mean. She was my boss. She was my direct report in this small little office of Super Bowl host committee in Atlanta. She was so mean. She was never inspiring at all. She was always short with me. She was sort of two-faced. She was hard to even at some level trust. And it was really almost like, if I can be just totally real, like she woke up every day. This was how I felt, that she woke up every day on a mission to make me totally miserable, right? Like, and to make my job so hard. I mean, that was my little 22-year-old self, how I felt. Now, here's what I wish I could tell you is that I found a way to connect with her and she became my mentor. And that we're still deeply connected and all these things. That is far from the truth. Now, I worked for this woman for 6 months, And every day, for the record, I would call my mom and dad on my way home from the office, and I would cry pretty much almost every day. I would cry and talk about how miserable it was. I was living at that time. Some of you know the story of when I moved to Atlanta, I negotiated a deal to teach tennis at an apartment complex in lieu of rent. And so I was living by myself, and, I would come home to my apartment, and I just was like, this is unbelievable. But I really always do believe that we finish what we start, right? If we, commit to do something for a period of time, we have to honor that. And so as difficult and as challenging as it was to work for her on so many levels, I would find myself on the phone with my parents sort of blaming her and her style, kind of complaining about the kinds of shenanigans she was pulling throughout the day. And to get you inside of those days, I would get to the office about 8:30. Again, like I said, it'd be dark, no windows in the office. I sat sort of right in the front. There was 2 or 3 offices in the back where she sat and Lehman. And then on the whole other side of the office was really where we started to fill it up with volunteers, et cetera, as we progressed. But there was this small little, kind of bench sort of to my right, sitting from my desk. And what this woman would do was, number one, when people would call the office, she would leave them on like perpetual hold. And it was unbelievably rude, in my opinion, but she would leave them on hold, and then I was bouncing back and forth trying to keep these incredible, for me at 22 years old, I was like, holy smokes, you're leaving the CMO of Coke on hold, you're leaving the commissioner of the NFL on hold. I mean, I couldn't get my head around it, right? Because I was dying for a hot second with these people. And I was trying to keep them on hold and try to not let them hang up, and, she'll be with you in a minute, and the whole deal. And what would happen as we got closer and closer to the actual Super Bowl, they would sometimes come up to the office, because this was really sort of the local group that was at some level sort of the boots on the ground in Atlanta for the Super Bowl. And so, these incredible leaders would come up and sit in the office. And what I began to see happen is, they would sit on that bench and they would watch this charade that I was attempting to navigate. And they had been on the other end of that as someone who probably at one point was calling in, but they were sort of watching me try to be what, if there was an Olympics for answering the phone, I was trying to get into it. You know what I mean? So they would sort of start to see this. So at some level, I began to, when maybe the opportunity would arise, or there would be a slight slowdown in calls, I would find these incredibly cool moments to, Chad, I'll say that one more time. I would find these incredibly cool moments where these leaders in Atlanta, a new town that I'd only been in a few months, were sitting on a bench in front of me, and she would do the same thing. She'd make them wait. And so I began to think, okay, how do I get them to like me enough to help me or hire me? How can I get this total rock star from Chick-fil-A, Coke, AT&T at the time, UPS, you name it, or folks that worked for the NFL, the Players Association. How could I get them to like or respect me enough to help me or hire me? And so what I began to sort of morph into was dreading going to work every day. At some level, just this desire to avoid it, hit eject, get back in my little Honda Accord and drive back to Michigan, to full-on engagement, right? To waking up every day so pumped about who might be coming up into the office, who might be sitting on that bench that I could meet. And how could I then begin to get inside of their world enough to maybe have a little nugget or two that I was able to share that would drive a bit of connection? I would, at some level, when I'd be driving in and inside of these moments when I wanted to string this woman up that I work for, where I thought, man, she's ruining my experience in sort of my first job, really, at some level, out of college, in Atlanta, all of that. I went from like judgment, angst, total annoyance to accepting that she was never going to be, the boss of the year. She was never, ever going to be somebody that I really even wanted to learn from. Now, I have to throw in that Lehman, awesome, right? Like, wow, what an incredible guy. And he was so kind to me. So I found myself shifting from, she's ruining my entire experience, and she's ruining at some level even my life in that moment as a 22-year-old, so excited in this new town, trying to sort of pursue this dream of getting into sports, to accepting she is who she is. How can I unlock and tap into the good here? And what was cool was we executed an awesome Super Bowl. And I am forever grateful for the connections and the relationships that I was able to make with those remarkable people sitting on that bench who were kind enough to give this schlep in February, after the Super Bowl had ramped and we had winded it all down, 20 minutes in their office. And I'm grateful that she, my boss, she served as a reference, which was pretty cool, because I began to tell myself something that my parents taught me, which is just keep loving, keep working hard to be kind. I would still try to go grab her coffee, as much as the truth is I wanted to spit at it and throw it on her desk. Just being real, folks. I would try to, just thought, gosh, how do I look? This is a 6-month deal. I know how to do hard things for a period of time. I'm gonna try to see if I can unlock something inside of maybe her in this. And of course, the biggest unlock was, without question, these remarkable relationships that I was so grateful to be able to build with some remarkable people in Atlanta, who were the same people who allowed me to navigate through and to what became my job. Let's dig into what's most important, which is, how can you take some of these ideas, a bit of this experience, and most importantly, extract it and lay it over top of your world. Lay it over top of some difficult people, some different people in your life. Lay it over top of that in service of creating something good out of it. Let's dig into what really matters most here, which is how you can apply it to your life, how you can lay it over top of someone or some people in your life who are difficult. And maybe they're different too, but maybe they're also difficult. I would encourage you, get really curious. Is there something here? And how can I drop my assumptions in service of allowing me to get curious, in service of me listening, in service of me asking genuine questions? Get really curious and drop your assumptions. And then try to differentiate between the behavior and the person, right? The behavior and the person. You could also think about it, differentiate between the circumstances and the person, and recognize, how can I peel through the layers of this situation and find something good inside of it? Unlock or tap into an opportunity inside of it. And then, I tell you, emotional regulation is a remarkably important skill for all of us as human beings. Now, what I mean by that is we have to keep our emotions in check, because if we don't, there's so many things that happen to us mentally, physically, It certainly changes the way we show up. And so what I would encourage you to do when we think about emotional regulation is get at some level, overly calm. Dial it down big time. This is something I learned from my dad. He is so good at when people get really amped, whether it was my brothers, the cable guy, he would dial it down big time. And what would happen in that moment is that some of it would change the dynamic significantly. I would also say tactically using words like we versus you or I can be a really powerful and subtle way to connect. And then the other thing I think is really important is pick your battles, right? I mean, difficult and different people are going to create a lot of opportunities to want to take the gloves off and just go. Pick your battles, manage your energy, right? Because the deal is, if you don't, it is a total recipe for exhaustion. I mean, like full on exhaustion. So if you're dealing with people who are difficult, consider what's worth going to bat for and what isn't. And focus on what really matters. Have you ever gotten into a difficult conversation with somebody, or even maybe an argument, or maybe it's with this person who's really difficult, and then at some level found yourself thinking, what do I want? Like, what do I want? What's the outcome that I want? Stay focused on that. Come up and out of it and stay focused on the outcome at some level that you're attempting to navigate to and through. Keep that front and center, and then pick your battles remarkably carefully, because our energy is such a precious resource. So don't waste it on the unnecessary. And then the other tip I would encourage you to consider is inject a little humor in some of these moments. Humor is such a powerful way to find a way to connect with difficult people. I'll tell you kind of a cool story. I tell stories all the time. Yesterday, literally, I go to my doctor, my OB doc, and I walk into her office. This is a woman that delivered all three of my girls. I know her really well. She has a pretty big practice office, and so there was a new receptionist behind the desk, and she was sitting there, and I walked in, and she sort of looked up at me, almost like annoyed that I was there. I didn't know her at all, and she kind of looks at me and says, sign in on the notepad there. So I signed my name, and do you have an updated insurance card? I said, I think I do, and I hand it to her, and she sort of pauses for a minute, and in that moment, another woman walked up. And she looks at this other woman and goes, you can sign in on the clipboard. And the girl looks at her and signs in, and then stands there and is looking at her. And the receptionist looked at this other woman and said, you can have a seat. I'll call you when I'm done. And I'm ready for you. And the woman sort of looked at her somewhat submissively at some level and sort of retreated back to a chair. And I looked at the receptionist, who was either having an off day, or maybe that's how she shows up every day. And I sort of smiled and I go, man, I can't imagine how many times you say that a day, huh? And she looks at me, and I was referring to, you can sign in on the clipboard. And she looks at me and says, oh, you have no idea. It's unbelievable. She said all day long. It's crazy. And she kind of smiled and laughed. And she goes, oh, you're here early. And she looked at me and smiled. And in that moment, we connected a bit. And it was just a little bit of humor. It opened her up. And then candidly, from sort of the little interaction that we had from that moment forward, I mean, she was sort of a little lighter, a little happier at some level in a really small way. But I share that because we can do these kinds of things with a little bit of humor through being what I shared as sort of my first point when we consider this, through just being a little bit curious. Humor is a powerful thing. It's a powerful thing in driving connection, particularly in some of those kinds of moments that we find ourselves in every single day. So as you consider how to apply it to your life, I would challenge you, get curious, get really curious. Drop the assumptions because the assumptions are blocking you from being curious. Differentiate between the person and the circumstances. The person potentially and even their behavior. Manage your emotions. Emotional regulation, such a powerful thing. Get overly calm in these moments. Be particularly careful with which battles you choose to step into and which ones to step away from. Stay focused on what matters most. And don't be afraid to lob in a little humor from time to time in service. So as I said on the onset, I can't promise you that these people are going to disappear. But what I hope this has helped you do is lay this formula at some level, this shift in mindset, these tools, these tactics over top of maybe some of the people in your life that are a little bit difficult. And I hope it helps you manage your energy around those relationship better. I hope it helps you manage your energy around those a little bit better and maybe, just maybe, connect. All right, all-stars, game changers, friends. Hit me up at hello@MollyFletcher anytime. I love to hear from you. And until next time, big hugs. As I always say, be safe.